start us off.
Ready?
Ready.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar today, Amazing Community's webinar, Future of Work and How We Can Prepare in the Present. I'm Leslie Fairstein. I'm the Executive Director of Amazing Community. And Amazing Community is a young nonprofit. We're about 2 years old. In fact, Stella, we met for the first time September 19th, 2017.
Unbelievable.
So it's just about 2 full years since we met and started talking about Stella's idea of how can she help women over 50 get back into the workforce. Our mission is to expand the workforce, the work horizon for women over 50. And that includes women who've taken a break, whether it's for childcare or elder care or an illness that they may have had. If they're looking to pivot from the job they have now to a different job, to a whole new career. And then those women who just want to get out on their own and want to become entrepreneurs. And we met for coffee and we were kind of bouncing these ideas around. I was at the time 66, 67 and couldn't even get an interview. So I certainly thought this was a brilliant idea. And we decided I said I thought it was a good idea to start a nonprofit. Stella said, can you be the executive director? I'm like, sure. And here we are, 2 years later. What we've been doing are webinars, action circles, and what we're most proud of are our 2-day workshops, conferences that we've had. We had our first one last year, Inclusion by Design, and I'm very excited about the one we have this year. And Stella's talk today is a precursor. It's Inclusion by Design, Women 50 Plus, Claiming Our Place in the Future of Work. And it's on October 28th and 29th here in New York City at PwC, which is on Madison Avenue and 42nd Street. And you can go to inclusionbydesign.org, see the agendas, and you can register. We still have an early bird pricing going on until Sunday. And we have 2 days. The first day is primarily devoted to women, to help them get back into the workforce, to think about how to upskill, to think about getting back their mojo, or what's their personal brand. And then on the second day, we have a whole day of panels and speakers who are going to be talking about just this topic. How can we claim our place in the future of work? And it's very exciting. We have some amazing speakers. So I urge you to take a look at inclusionbydesign.org, sign up. We have an added bonus today. Right after the webinar, we're going to pick randomly somebody to get a free 2-day ticket to the event, to the conference. So if you don't hear from me right away, go online and buy your early bird ticket. Before I introduce Stella formally, I want you to know that we are recording this. As we said, if you're not comfortable with being recorded, please disconnect now and you can see the webinar afterwards. We'll be sending all the information out. And please post your questions in the chat and I will be monitoring them. And at the end of the webinar, end of her piece, Stella will answer all your questions. So it gives me great joy and pleasure to introduce Stella formally. Stella is on a mission to humanize the workplace. She works with the Conference Board's Fortune 500 corporations, the members who are building global workforce strategies. She leads Reframe Work, Inc., a consulting firm that advises leaders on workplace, HR, and analytics strategies. And of course, as we know, she's the founder of Amazing Community and the chairperson of the board. Previously, Stella transformed the workplace at the intersection of technology, analytics, and HR at Fidelity Investments, TIAA, IBM, Pricewaterhouse, and PwC Consulting and their clients. It's my honor to introduce Stella.
Thank you so much, Leslie. A lot of buzzwords and titles, but at the core of it is the passion to make the workplace better for all of us. And it's to some degree a self-serving mission because I'm looking at my children. I have 3 children, 12, 18, and 23, and they are my future of work. And I feel as a parent, I have the responsibility to prepare them as well as the workplace for them to thrive and accomplish and fulfill whatever they choose to do. At the same time, I feel the workplace needs to also stay informed on all the changes that are happening to make sure that in the pursuit of realizing shareholder value or bigger revenue or whatever it is the business goal they are pursuing, they don't dehumanize that workplace and continue to keep the us as humans at the center of their attention. So welcome to the webinar. This is gonna bring a lot of data, a lot of numbers. It is intended to be really a conversation more than me pushing the data towards you. I would encourage all of you to ask questions if you feel you want to interrupt and ask voice question, not only through the chat. Please do so. This is about us to discuss what's happening around the world and how we can make sense out of it. So let's start with the notion of change. The core message of everything we're going to talk about is the changing world around us. And yes, change is happening at the industry level, at the macro level. There are organizational success that are being impacted if they don't adapt. But at the end of the day, change is really deeply personal, and it requires complex interaction across multiple layers of the society and organizations and individuals to make that change. And humans, when they think about change, there are four categories or four bigger groupings that those changes fall under. We change when there is a hierarchical direction, right? We're being told what to do, and that starts with parents telling us what to do or not. That comes with rules, with leadership, with governance, with regulation, expertise. So when we think about the disruptions that are happening and impacting the workplace of today, that's one area that may need to change as well. And the humans will have to come up with new changes or new leadership behaviors that will have to permeate through the workplace environment. Second type of change is individualism. So this is about us as human beings. We decide to change something because it is part of our narrative. It is part of our story. That's why you see people starting their own business. This is driving a lot of creativity because people want to invent something new. It drives market dynamics. It drives competition. So again, that's another factor that may influence the change, as well as it is really the true human aspiration that influences that. Third type of group of change is really solidarity. So this is when we are part of a tribe. We want to belong. We want to make sure that people who are part of that tribe are taken care of. This is where we bring responsibility, social justice, to some degree tribalism, and it's influencing our decision. And then the last one is fatalism. This is when we say, what's the point? We're gonna die all anyway. And religion and spiritual practices typically provide a way to cope with some of these conclusions, but at the same time, as fewer and fewer people choose different spiritual practices, it may not be necessarily the case. So again, for us, we're at an inflection point, redefining what it means to be human in this 21st century and how we adapt to the changes at all the levels, be that individual, personal, the way we think, the way we operate, the way we belong to a community and how we influence that community to change, how we influence the organization to change, and how we as a society change overall. So let's dive into the changes around us. As a former consultant, I try to alliterate a lot of things to build them into frameworks. So I'll talk about two frameworks and how I think about the disruptions as well as opportunities to change. So the disruptions, I categorize them in 4 Ds. So let's start with the first one, demographic shifts. Demographic shifts are critical because they shape the construct of the society in a major way. They create labor force, they create economic growth, they create consumers, they create ability for us to project how the world is going to evolve around different countries, different societies. And it's important to start with that macro view to just understand where we may be for the next few decades. So if you think about the population growth. We've been in exponential growth for quite some time. Over the last 100 years, the population more than quadrupled. But the growth reached peak around 62, 63. And at that time, it was a 2.2% population growth. Since then, we have been seeing a decline in that growth. And at this point in time, we're about 1% only per year. So by the end of the century, the expectation, the projection is that the population growth will be dismal and minimal, and will get to about 0.1%. So the number of people in the world will reach about 10 billion, and the expectation is that it will not grow at the same pace anymore. In terms of drivers of growth, there are three components. One is the fertility rate, is the population momentum, the life expectancy. So let's dive into some of these. So the fertility rate is the number of children expected per lifetime per woman. So the fertility rate was about 5 children per woman in mid-60s. And since then, the fertility rate dropped almost to half. So right now we're standing at 2.5 children per woman. As countries get richer, as economies grow or become more developed, the fertility rate tends to fall. So we see that as an evidence in primarily mature economies, but also growing and developing economies are starting to experience the same. Another term to know here is the replacement fertility rate. So this is the number of children that are needed to keep the population size at the same level. So currently the global replacement fertility rate is 2.3. So that's slightly below the 2.5 that we're experiencing. And that's why we see that continued growth. And the influencing factor to this is the population momentum. So this is how many women are of reproductive age, and as a result, they continue to have births. So the number of women, the sheer number of women continue to bring more children, even though the fertility rate declines. So that over time, as fewer and fewer women are entering that reproductive age, obviously combined with the dropping fertility rate, that will bring the growth of the population to a standstill. So right now, we're still riding that wave of more women entering the reproductive age, but over time, that momentum will impact us dramatically. So let's talk about the longevity, right? People live longer, and this is bringing structural changes in the global population and distribution. So we see drivers such as decline in child mortality. We have better access to healthcare. The extreme poverty pockets are shrinking. So it all leads to a longer lifespan. And if we think about how the longevity changed, it increased from less than 30 years to now globally we expect to live 70 years or more, and it will continue to grow. Just an interesting statistic, just comparing between 2000 when 27% of Americans were 55 years or older, now that proportion is at 36.2%. So again, we live longer, we have fewer younger generations coming in, and at the same time, this creates another challenge, the overall aging of the population. So the number of people aged 60 has tripled since 1950. And it was around 600 million in 2000, and now it's expected to reach 2.1 billion by 2050. Now we live in an age where for the first time there are more people over 64 than children younger than 5. So from economic perspective, this has a big impact. So for example, older people, they have higher accumulated savings than younger people, but they spend less on consumer goods. So that impacts the balance of economic spending as well as investment and product production. Some economists look at this as, they see advantages, such as opportunity to possibly automate and use technological development without causing unemployment. So a case in point is Japan, where there had to be a lot of creative thinking to replenish the labor pool and augment it with technology to continue to have a productive and well-operating environment. Population aging also increases the expenditure at the governmental level. So if you think about the healthcare, that will continue to demand more investments as the population ages. It will force governments to make hard choices between taxes and possibly play a smaller role in the provision of the healthcare. But what's interesting, there were some studies that were looking at the rising dramatic cost of healthcare, and not all of them are attributed to aging population. Really, a lot of it is because of the higher use of diagnostic tests, doctor and drug costs, etc. So it's not just a easy to draw conclusion. Another expenditure is education, right? Most governments invest a lot in the primary and elementary and secondary education. But these expenses will tend to fall as fewer younger generations are entering the world. And at the same time, it may create more opportunity for tertiary education or people who are pivoting and going back to the education to get a new degree or learn new skill. And then, of course, the social security system is experiencing significant problems with this shifting balance. So the defined benefit pension systems are now having a tough time being sustainable in the long term. And this pushes some governments to extend the retirement age and have creatively and shift the responsibility for these social protection systems from the governments to the individuals. So it's in essence creating a very different set of challenges to govern and sustain when you have fewer entrants into the workforce to support through taxes or other types of contributions. Another challenge, another term to keep in mind is the dependency ratio. So a productive population, for a productive population, it is essential to maintain the economic and social stability. And societies are split in two groups. You have working age and non-working age. So working age population is people between 15 and 64. And then non-working, also called dependents, are those under 15 and over 65. So the balance between the working age and the dependents, it's important again from the functioning of the population perspective. If you have too many dependents, the working age population has to account for the increase in labor productivity, for capital formation, for information, communication improvements, and savings rate. And it's right now at the moment, majority of the countries have a dependent population that it's about 50-60% of the size of the working age population. But as more and more people get older, that might tip over. So that will again create the same challenges that we discussed on the previous page. The great news though is as we live longer and we stay active and healthier longer, we choose to continue to stay in the workforce. Sometimes that's by choice, sometimes that's because of the affordability level, but it's a great news to economists probably to consider that we now have a record number of people who are age 65 and older who continue to stay employed. And that work span or employment span may extend further. Let's talk about the gender aspect of it. So if we're looking at the gender distribution, for the most part, most countries have a female share of about 49 to 51%. So it's pretty balanced. But when it comes to employment, that's not really the case. We have globally about 2.7 women who are legally restricted from having the same choice as men. UN did a study, and out of 189 economies that were assessed, 104 of them still have laws preventing women from working in specific jobs. 59 economies of those have no laws on sexual harassment and discrimination in the workplace. And the 18 economies have husbands that can legally prevent their wives from working. So again, we have a long way around the world to get to gender parity. The great news is a lot more women are getting education, a lot more women are getting and entering into the workplace. So there is a high level of labor force participation for women, and they are at 63%. However, that's still below the men labor force participation, where it stands at 94. Half of the women who are not in the labor force, they list caregiving as a reason for non-participation. Naturally, women will have children and most likely will step out of the labor force to care for their children or care for their ailing parents. So that could continue to be a challenge and a barrier, and countries where there are more protections and ability to supplement and provide policies that enable that caretaking responsibility to be shifted to alternative channels will benefit from this labor force tremendously. So what is the value and contribution of women? Women currently contribute 37% of the global GDP. If you account for the value created by women not accounted in this economic output, there's another $10 trillion, which is 13% of the global GDP. Women are disproportionately contributing to society and household with work that is invisible and often is not as valued. Caring for children and elderly, cleaning, cooking, just supporting the welfare of their families and their communities. And that again, if it was addressed, would create a great contribution to the global economy. And why that is good, it is because women's participation in the labor force is impacting the stability. It increases the opportunities for families to get access to better education, to better, and it's just a role modeling for the children or the girls that they have in their family. And it's not just at the personal level, it's also at the global level. If we were to close the global gender gap, that could add to the global economy between 12 to 28 trillion by 2025. But they need a different degree of flexibility. They need role models. They need to have reentry programs. They need to have upskilling. So it's both at the organizational level changes that are necessary, as well as the policy-making changes that are important to create this equality and parity. And of course, the pay gap is persistent for women, especially as they reach their childbearing age. And right now, globally, we're seeing about 20% difference in the income brought home between women at the global level. And countries are losing about 160 trillion in wealth during this lifetime earning difference between women and men. So now let's talk about another trend, which is mobility. Mobility can come in several types. One is mobility that we traditionally refer to as migration. This is between countries, between region, and it is a great opportunity for countries who, especially experiencing labor shortages or low fertility rate, to supplement its workforce, assuming there is attractive opportunities for them to be there and more stability. But there's also different trends that are impacting this labor force moving between regions. We don't see as much mobility between underdeveloped economies and highly advanced economies. It's more of a progression and step. So, but it's nevertheless an important influencer of how the workforce composition is shifting, and different people from different regions, of course, bring along their experiences, their norms, their religion preferences, and all of that has to be accounted in how the workplace taps into this labor pool differently and how the workplace can be designed differently. Another type of movement is urbanization. So there's a lot more people moving from urban areas to rural areas. And in 2007, for the first time, more than half of the world population lived in big cities. And now the expectation is by 2030, that number will expect to grow by 5 billion. So that's an unique interesting set of opportunities as well as challenges, because you need to start thinking about differently about your infrastructure, about your urban planning. And if you combine this trend with the aging population, you need to think about better access to healthcare, better community shifting and building to create walking spaces, to create community, parks and public spaces. And that social infrastructure that is, it will require more accessibility and more inclusion. The other type of mobility is between jobs. There's a lot more mobility between jobs. In April of this year, 3.5 million workers quit their jobs. It's the highest number ever recorded in a single month. And it's an indication of a very, very healthy labor market, but also it's an indication of how much more empowered individuals feel to make a choice and work for a company that provides them with the value they're seeking to get out of it. Of course, all of these changes that we're talking about are bringing a very diverse and mixed and multi-generational workforce, and it's becoming more about inclusion and creating the sense of belonging than just looking at the diversity segments that we traditionally in the workplace look like. Why this matters is because labor market is tight, and it's for the first time we now see more jobs created than people looking for jobs. So for example, in the US economy in June, we had 7.4 million job openings and only 6 million people who are looking for work. And of course, there is caveat to be put here about the measurement and those who are longer term unemployed and may have given up on their job search. And it also may not necessarily account for those who are underemployed and have to piece together multiple jobs to make their end meets. But it's a positive sign of the empowerment of the workers. And the interesting thing is there is no industry that it's immune to this change. And several studies estimate that over the next decade, by 2029, employers in nearly every state will have significant shortages of both workers with some college degree or associate degrees, as well as bachelor degrees. And this will lead to, this lack of workers will impact and lead to nearly 1.2 trillion of economic output that is being lost. So in short, all of this is saying is we are living longer, we're aging. This is impacting the number of people that are available to do the work and support the economies in the long term. And the companies are paying attention. And we need to start thinking differently about the retirement and at what age we retire and how we choose to stay active and engaged, because it's benefiting not only us personally, but also the broader society. We need to rethink educational system and how we look at the education as a lifelong endeavor. And it's not just about colleges and educational institutions, but also what the organization provides as on-the-job training, apprenticeship programs, as well as how the individual stays curious and pursues more interesting topics to learn about and be open to. It requires different flexibility practices and work arrangement to accommodate women or anyone who chooses to stay and care, provide a caretaking responsibility. It requires more accessibility principles. So as we get older and our physical or mental capacities decline, we can still be productive. And obviously it requires a lot more inclusive mindset. So that's the demographic shifts. I'll try to go a little faster through the rest of the three. So digitization, that's the second D. And some of us refer to it as automation. Some of it is about bringing more technology into our life. But nevertheless, all of the devices that we have around us, internet, cloud, and a few others that we'll dive into, are all changing how we as human beings interact with each other, as well as get the work done. And in some cases, that's as simple as implementing a software that helps change a process that is done by the technology as opposed to a human being. But in many cases, it has a bigger, more dramatic impact on entire industries. And we see a lot of technology first incumbents shifting into adjacent spaces to completely change what industries are all about. Just think about what Amazon did to many companies and many industries. In this digitization space, autonomization is becoming also an interesting trend. So there's a lot more push to defer the activities to autonomous technologies to get it done. So think about delivery services. There was a startup, Starship Technologies, that in 2019 made 50,000 commercial deliveries with these technologies. The robot that is seen here in the picture carries goods to its destination in a 4-mile radius, right? It's parcels, it's groceries and food. What impact will that have on mail, on some of the current shipping organizations and the whole supply chain in general? There are autonomization of harvesting. So in farming, you look at commercial apple harvesting, at creating autonomous watering systems. In tracking, there is a big push, and tracking, it's an interesting space because there are it's one of the occupations that is experiencing extreme labor shortage. People just don't want to become truck drivers, and everybody's assuming it'll get autonomized anyway, and nor younger generations doesn't want to get into it. And on the flip side, the advancements in this autonomous driving is making it possible for that to happen. And of course, all of the big automotive companies are now getting into the space of innovating and creating autonomous vehicle. Of course, it's a long way until it becomes commonplace, but we're moving into that direction. And hopefully one day we can just sit in our car and catch up on work and continue to be productive while we move from one place to another. The other interesting space is bionic amplification. So this is where the bionic technology is helping amplify or augment our physical capacities. And this can be from creating prosthetic arms or limbs, or creating exoskeletons that enable us to have almost superpowers and lift heavier objects and decrease the amount of energy that we need to both wear that exoskeleton as well as perform different tasks. It is used a lot in the military, but if you see in this picture, this is an example of exoskeleton used in Lowe's facility. It helps people lift heavier objects, and obviously it impacts their well-being, reduces the number of possibly the number of injuries in the workplace, etc. So it's a positive development, and it helps us humans to become more amplified in our powers. This is another interesting development. So it's the new reality, virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. I may not be able to launch, but when we share the presentation, we'll include the link to the video. So this is Madonna, and she, in fact, this month started her new world tour. But in her recent performance at the Billboard Awards, she used augmented reality and to bring her different incarnations on stage and different inventive performance elements such as butterflies and puffs of smoke and rain. So again, Madonna figured out the new way to reinvent herself yet again. And this time is using new types of technology to enhance the experience of people who are participating in this in these concerts. So let me explain the terminology. So augmented reality adds digital elements to the live view and is using cameras or smartphones. So if you think of Snapchat Lens, or if you think of the game Pokemon Go, those are an example of augmented reality. So you have your reality in real world, and then you add digital elements by looking through your device at it. Virtual reality is immersive. You put a headset, such as Oculus Rift or Google Cardboard or something similar, to fully immerse yourself in this technology. So you are transported into a completely new world. A lot of that is being used now in entertainment, where you can be part of the concert. But who is to say you cannot use it to train people or to work and go to meetings in a virtual reality if you can create that experience? And then mixed realities combines both the artificial and the virtual reality. So all of this is now just starting to take shape, and I think organizations are starting to pay attention. Walmart is now using virtual reality to train their employees in stores. So it has a lot of great potential. Another digital change is the conversation, and these are conversational AI they refer to anytime. So this is messaging apps, speech-based assistants, chatbots that now allow for a very personalized interaction for organizations to engage with the customers. And it's becoming commonplace. We use it through text. There's a lot more development in using through voice. So the Amazon Alexa or Google Home provides that. So it's an interesting space. It taps into our human preference to interact through voice as well as through text. The other types of conversations that are getting much more personal is the brain to machine interface. And there's a lot of experimentation in this space. Facebook is in July released a new update on its brain reading computer interface. Musk is getting into the space by creating the company called Neuralink that creates little nanosensors that can get implanted in your brain. And while originally the intent for that system is to help people with brain traumas or leisures to be able to function longer, but who is to say that we will not have a lot more cosmetic applications for some of these changes too. Robotics, it's this interdisciplinary branch, and it integrates engineering, science, mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, information engineering, many others. And it can be as simple as a robot on assembly line that has been around for quite some time to a lot more humanoid robots that are now becoming a novelty, but they're evolving fast. So the example on the screen is the Sophia robot, who has taken the world by storm because it has facial recognition. It also can emulate the facial movements of humans, and it sometimes has some smart comments too. So look her up on YouTube and listen to some of her interactions. So there are a lot more technological advancements, but at the core of it, what really the conclusions we need to make from this is how we define work and how we consider what work is. How do we train ourselves to be able to operate alongside with these digital friends, as well as how we use humans to train them, because at the end of the day, they are trained only based on our worldview and how we choose the data and how we infer our worldview when training this digital labor. What is the impact on jobs? And while there is a big hysteria about a lot of jobs being taken away, I think that it's also a huge opportunity to create new ones. Somebody needs to train these robots. Somebody needs to operate and fix them. So it comes down to creating new skills, and a lot of it is happening at the fringes, at the intersection of multiple fields. And of course, this creates also opportunity for all of us, where we can bring the strengths from our spaces and what we've grown up, but just adding a few more details or a few more understanding of how some of these technologies are operating to be able to create a new space for ourselves. And the more important problem and question we have to deal with is how you govern this world and how you define it in an ethical way going forward. The third D is datafication. So this is about the digital world around us that is creating a lot more data. And one other term to consider is Internet of Things. So these are all the smart devices and technologies that are interacting with each other and collecting all type of data. Right now it's projected that by 2020, it will have 200 billion of these devices all interacting in one big network. So this, again, creates a lot more data around us. It creates a lot more opportunity to communicate, but also it creates a lot more security risks and ability to infiltrate it in a negative way by malicious actors. The pace of change and the information creation is also accelerating. We send 16 million text messages in a minute. We swipe Tinder 990,000 times a minute. 156 million emails are sent, and that will continue to grow. There are 154,000 calls on Skype. Again, the number of activities and operations we take in this digital world is increasing, as well as the ability to use the data to make and infer different decisions based on that is changing and amplifying. Everybody has presence online, and everybody cares about digital brand, and organizations starting to care, and in the workplace that's also matter, because people are going to provide feedback and others are going to make a decision whether to purchase the product or whether to come and work for you as a company. So that data is becoming now more important for organizations to analyze and pay attention to it, because that may be making a difference between their ability to survive in the long term. And if you look at the actual numbers, there are estimates that right now we have about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created each day, and that things will continue to accelerate. Over the last 2 years alone, there was 90% of the data in the world that was generated. That's just incredible. And the estimate is that by 2020, we will reach about 44 zettabytes of data. So that means that there will be 40 times more bytes that are stars in the observable universe. And while this data allows different decision-making, it also implies that we need to prepare and build this data literacy so we can be more comfortable to use it in our day-to-day work environment. And of course, this is where AI comes in and plays to help us make sense out of this data much faster and on a much higher scale. And the AI is not just something that products and sophisticated financial modeling is being used for, but we also see it applied in the workplace. We have now a lot of algorithms built to select you as a candidate from a sea of resumes, which is important to know because that means more about how you can construct your resume to be easily picked up by the AI or the algorithm that is pre-screening you. It also impacts how you get onboarded and using AI to make decisions about the path or some of the recommendations for who you can connect, what type of learning you can take, who are the people in the organization you need to be part of network. So all of those things are impacting HR world and workplace dramatically. And for us, it's important to stay again on top and understand how it's working, because it has a big risk that comes with it. It's the data that is being fed to train the algorithm, as well as the rules that are being built into the AI that can perpetuate bias or can introduce inequalities. So again, the digitization reframing is about making decisions differently and having a lot more access to information at our disposal. But we also should consider all the risks that come with that power and how we make this data around us and the decisions we make as a result of it unbiased, or in a way that, again, brings more human to the center. The last D is disintermediation. So this is about eliminating the intermediaries from the value chain of work. And this comes in terms of the temporary employment, and some of it refers to gig economies, some of it refers to people who engage in non-traditional type of work or part-time. And the latest estimate is somewhere between 25 and 30% of workers have engaged in non-traditional gig work. And it's expected to grow, especially as more and more platforms become available and enable us to do that work. And in some cases, people choose to do that permanently. In some cases, they just augmented their income through these channels. Another thing that these platforms and gig work provides is that you have the ability now to work out of anywhere. And it was an interesting article in Wall Street Journal yesterday about a lot more people choosing to move from high density and highly populated coasts to more areas in the middle of America, or where the life cost of living is lower, as well as the quality of life enables them to live on an income otherwise that would be unaffordable on the coasts. 3D printing is another disintermediation example where organizations don't necessarily need to establish big manufacturing facilities. They can 3D print products, equipment, even houses in a much easier and quicker way. And it's changing how companies potentially decide on where to establish their facilities. So in this example, Adidas started printing their soles, and it enables them to print them locally as opposed to making them somewhere in East Asia and shipping them. So just think about the impact on supply chain globally that some of these technologies will have. Blockchain is another interesting disintermediator. So blockchain is a distributed peer-to-peer network, and think of it as a ledger. It allows transactions to be tracked in a way that it's immutable. You cannot really break it and tamper with it. And what is great about it is it creates that trustless system where you can put faith in anyone you have interaction with or make a trade with. And it allows, a lot of countries are even experimenting with it. So for example, in 2015, Honduras started building a registry title on this blockchain technology. Kenya, Uruguay, Panama are investing in it to tackle payment problems in the regions. One of the speakers at the Inclusion by Design in October used blockchain to enable women in Afghanistan gain access to employment after training them on digital technology. So again, it can provide a disintermediation impact to a lot of the financial industry, as well as intellectual property rights, as well as some of the incumbents who are now playing that role. At the same time, it creates a higher speed of interaction and transacting with each other. Another change that is being disintermediated is the whole notion of office space. We have the ability to work out of anywhere, out of the Starbucks, out of Subway, out of our device in some quiet space in the park. Co-working space is becoming a very popular thing, and not only with freelancers and stay-at-home professionals who are just looking for a smaller community, but also for large organizations who are having to rethink their investments in the real estate and office environments. Of course, you have a whole slew of platforms and technologies that now enable us to trade with each other, to share things with each other, and sometimes with a total stranger. Just think about getting in Uber with somebody you never met, and you just get in a car and get to the destination, or using the couch surfing, where you can rent a couch in somebody's home. So again, this is disintermediating traditional industries, hoteling and transportation and taxi, etc. But it creates opportunities for a lot of people to be more creative about usage of resources around us, to take advantage of the collaborative economy and creative consumptions. So what is the refrain here? there is no status quo. It's really a new world of work where there's a lot more change. Speed of change is accelerating, and we have a lot more opportunities to take advantage of this technologies and developments. The other part of it is it's a symmetry in the fact that no longer the size or the scale will guarantee you success. So organizations need to pay attention where these innovations are coming from and what is the opportunity for them to stay ahead of that game before they're being disrupted. The other way of thinking is moving from binary decision making, where we typically say, well, are we going to insource or outsource? Are we going to automate or keep the human being, to more of a complex decision making that you have to make. And then it redefines what it means to be a human in the 21st century, the behaviors we need to exhibit, the skills we need to have, and how we interact with each other. So how do we cope with all of this? This is my second framework. I refer to it as 4 Ws. So this is rethinking how we define what work is and creating a more complex understanding of the units of activities that have to get done in order to accomplish an outcome. Nowadays, we attribute that to jobs, and I think that's where we get stuck, and that's where the labor shortages come in, because we say, here's this definition of a perfect unicorn, and we're gonna spend a lot of time looking for that unicorn, as opposed to saying, no, the outcome we're trying to get to is this, and in order to accomplish that, we need this collection of activities to get done. And we can ascribe some to different types of workers, be that individuals or contingents or crowds or digital labor. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to orchestrate the work as opposed to just being limited to one construct. Once you understand what the work is and the workforce that can get it done, then you can start thinking about the workplace. Before we go there. So the engaging of the workers can take different forms as well, right? You don't necessarily need to hire them as full employment contract. It can be an independent or a freelancer, or you can go after people who have loved the company, the alumni, because they are more likely have a higher success of integrating back. Do you possibly form relationships or joint ventures with other organizations to help you attract the talent that you need to get the work done? And then, of course, in this pursuit, we should not remember that every human is unique and requires possibly different accommodations and inclusion. What a single parent needs may be different than what individual with visual impairment needs, as opposed to somebody who English is not the first language. So again, organizations have to start personalizing some of the experiences of their workers in order to tap into the talents. And now we're getting to the workplace. Again, the workplace doesn't have to be a physical office anymore. It can be a digital environment. It can be remote. It can be in a virtual world, right? Tapping into these alternative ways of interacting with each other, and the technology enables us, will provide more flexibility to organizations to get the work done. And last W is the worth. The value system is changing, and what matters to us is changing. The assumption always has been that people come to work for money, but once you reach a certain level of income, it becomes a lot more nuanced. Some people want to come because they want to belong to a community. Some people want to have an impact and have a bigger purpose. So organizations, again, can have a lot more at their disposal to play with to create a different work environment and provide those values to the individuals. One of my favorite example of how to rethink those values is to look at what happened in the consumer world. So there's an interesting study that Bain did, and they came up with this value pyramid, and different people expect from the products different things. And at the bottom of the core, it has to be easy to use, it has to be delightful, it has to bring a different experience, but it gets much more complicated. Some people want to buy products because they feel nostalgic, or it makes them feel they have a status. And further up, they buy it for transcendence purposes. similar types of values structure can be applied to the workplace. And who doesn't want to work in an environment where it's easy to get the work done, or you can produce something that can help others be better or live longer. There are other few things that are happening that forcing the organizations to change. First of all, is a lot more disclosures and expectations for transparent reporting. So new ISO standards, SEC is issuing a lot more human capital disclosures. So all of this will create transparency and visibility to how organizations are treating their workforce. So naturally, this will create a lot more demand for changes. There is also a very interesting change that happened in August. On August 19, 181 CEOs declared or created a new statement of purpose for the corporation. And it's shifting from shareholder value creation to be more inclusive. And it's focused on delivering value to customers, to investing in employees, to fair and ethical treatment of suppliers, to investing and supporting the community they operate in, and then generating long-term value for the shareholders. So again, it's early days of what this means, but the sheer fact that we have a lot more responsible sort of actions that corporations hopefully will use in their decision-making and broader set of stakeholders, it's a very positive change. And of course, more importantly, is the fact that we need to pay attention to broader societal changes, and sustainable development goals are providing us with that framework. So what organizations can do, they can look at bringing equality and inclusion in the workplace, create quality jobs, create accessible workplaces, create a better employee experience, and make sure that the decisions they're making today don't have a long-lasting negative impact, and it will enable them to survive actually in the long term as organizations. And what we can do, we need to stay informed about some of these changes, and we need to know our rights. We need to pay attention to different developments and continuously upskill ourselves. We need to demand inclusion and accessibility in the workplace. We need to support each other and those who have less access to the opportunities. We need to expand our own horizons and the horizons for others. Leading to that change. Yes.
We have 3 minutes left.
Sounds good.
So
more importantly.
Okay. I don't think we have a whole lot of time for questions. Yeah. Elise Veron did share a site, perhaps of interest for training using VR. It's equalreality.com.
Yeah.
So just wanted everyone to know that. And Virginie Glaenzer had a question, but I think it's a little bit too long to answer right now. So maybe we can get back to Virginie.
Sure. We'll look at all the interaction on chat and then get back to all of you.
Yeah, that'd be great. So Stela, thank you. This was so informative. It was great. And again, we're going to be sending out the link so that you can see it again and take a look at the Stela's PowerPoint. I'm going to send out all the attachments. And don't forget inclusionbydesign.org. And we hope to see you October 28th and 29th. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.